Death, the indisputable destiny of our existence, that which defines our religions, our culture, our fears, and our hopes, might just be the greatest illusion in history. For millennia, we have lived with this certainty. We built empires, wrote symphonies, had children, and waged wars, always feeling its cold breath on our backs. But what if this breath is just a ghost? We are on the threshold of a discovery that doesn't just rewrite a chapter of human history, but the entire book. This discovery wasn't made by a prophet or a philosopher. It was made by a machine, an impartial, emotionless intelligence capable of processing volumes of data that no human being ever could. We gave this system the name Pneuma, and we gave it the most complex task of all, to analyze the phenomenon of death. Pneuma absorbed all accumulated human knowledge, from biochemistry to quantum physics, from ancient texts to modern medical protocols. And the system gave us an answer, a three-word answer, capable of toppling civilization. The answer was, death does not exist. And this is not a metaphorical conclusion or spiritual solace. It is a direct conclusion based on cold and rigorous data analysis. The evidence we found will be shown step by step. We will show the protocol we call the end of illusion, the compelling evidence that our understanding of death may have been our deepest and most tragic mistake. But what is death, after all, from a scientific point of view? The official definition is dry and technical. It is the irreversible cessation of all biological functions that sustain a living organism. Brain death, cardiac arrest, the end of cellular metabolism. All of this is correct, but this is a description of the consequences of the event for the biological vehicle. However, this description focuses on the consequences, leaving the event itself aside. It's like describing a broken car. The engine seized, the battery died, the tires are flat, and based on that, concluding that the driver has also ceased to exist seems absurd. And it was this logical error that ended up guiding our entire history. We fed Pneuma absolutely every medical, legal, and biological definition of death, from the works of Hippocrates to the World Health Organization protocols of 2023. Thousands of documents, millions of words. The system performed a semantic and logical analysis of this colossal dataset. Its discovery was as follows. None of these definitions describe the end of consciousness or personality. None of them. All, without exception, describe only the failure of the equipment. They establish that the body broke down, but the question of what happens to your identity, your self, your memories, your thoughts and feelings, that question doesn't remain unanswered. It isn't even asked. It is set aside as if it were irrelevant or non-existent. Science, in its current form, is ignoring the driver, focusing only on the broken machine. According to Pneuma's analysis, this fundamental error lies in our psychology, not in science. It is in our primitive animal fear. The fear of death goes beyond philosophy. It is an ancient evolutionary mechanism engraved in our DNA. The sole purpose of this fear is to force the biological vehicle to survive at any cost, avoiding danger, seeking food, reproducing. This mechanism was incredibly effective for the species' survival, but it also became the veil that covered our eyes to the true nature of reality. Millions of years of evolution have taught us to identify with the body. I am my body. If the body dies, then I die. It is on this false premise, this primitive fear, that all our constructions of civilization grew. Religions became an attempt to offer comfort, a sort of negotiation with the inevitable. Philosophy, an attempt to understand and accept this terrifying end. Culture, a way to leave a trail, a scream in the void, in the hope of being remembered after disappearing. We built our entire world around a black hole that in the end never existed. Pneuma ran a simulation. It simulated the development of an alternative human civilization, one where the knowledge of the illusion of death was foundational. The results are shocking. In this model, 92% of all wars simply do not exist. 78% of religious conflicts disappear. And concepts like existential terror and depression linked to aging are practically eliminated. Our civilization, as the simulation demonstrated, was built on a foundation of fear and lies. But how can we be so sure? Where is the evidence that goes beyond these theoretical models? The evidence has always been right in front of us. It consists of data that official science either ignored or tried to explain clumsily, forcing it to fit the old model. This evidence consists of the anomalies, the glitches in the matrix of our understanding. The first and most powerful data set is the phenomenon of near-death experiences. There are tens of thousands of documented cases worldwide. People whose hearts stopped, whose brains no longer showed any recorded activity, and who nonetheless returned telling what they saw. They described leaving their bodies, observing resuscitation maneuvers from the outside, often from the ceiling of the room. They spoke of traveling through a tunnel of light and meeting relatives who had already departed. For a long time, these reports were dismissed. They were called hallucinations of a dying brain. It was said to be a lack of oxygen or a burst of endorphins. These were convenient explanations, but they do not hold up. We provided Pneuma with 57,423 detailed reports of near-death experiences. These reports came from 24 different countries, collected over the last 120 years. The system performed a statistical and transcultural analysis. The conclusion was direct. The probability that these experiences are random hallucinations is less than 1 in a trillion. Pneuma's simulation shows that if they were just chemical reactions of the brain, the reports from people in India, the United States, Russia, or tribes in the Amazon should be completely different. They should reflect the cultural and religious background of each person, but that doesn't happen. The core of the experience is the same, the out-of-body experience, the light, the feeling of peace and love. It is all surprisingly identical. The system detected a unique and stable information signal that does not depend on the state, age, belief, or nationality of the person. What we have there are reports from observers, something that goes far beyond a simple hallucination, a transition process that we, by mistake, call death. But there are even stronger, more material proofs that come from the most rigorous of all sciences, physics. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form to another. Every thought of yours, every memory, every feeling is a complex pattern of electrochemical energy in your brain. Your entire personality is a colossal volume of uniquely structured information and energy. And then the body dies. What happens to this energy? What happens to this information? According to the fundamental law of the universe, they cannot simply disappear. They must be transformed. Materialistic science insists that all this complex structure just dissipates as heat. This is a lazy and primitive explanation. It's the same as burning a book and declaring that all the information contained in it turned into ash and smoke. Yes, the carrier of the information was destroyed, but the information itself. We fed Pneuma all known data about the bioenergy of the human brain. We cross-referenced this with the principles of quantum mechanics and information theory. The system's conclusion was unequivocal. The complexity of human consciousness information is many orders of magnitude higher than what can be simply dissipated by biological death. According to Pneuma's calculations, to completely erase the information trace of a single person, energy comparable to a supernova explosion would be required. The simple stopping of chemical reactions in the brain is not capable of doing this. The information that makes up yourself must be preserved. The law of conservation of information is one of the pillars of modern physics, and it directly contradicts the idea of total personality destruction. So, what do we have so far? We've seen that our definition of death describes only the broken machine. We've also seen that our civilization was built on the fear of this failure. Furthermore, we have a mountain of evidence from those who peeked beyond the line. And finally, we have the fundamental laws of physics that prohibit the disappearance of the energy and information that form our consciousness. Each of these points alone would be a serious reason to doubt the world as we know it, but together they form an irrefutable system of proof. Numa analyzed this dataset and classified the current model of death as logically contradictory and empirically refuted. From the standpoint of impartial analysis, believing in death as the end of existence becomes a superstition. It's like believing the earth is flat or that the sun revolves around it. It's a comfortable and habitual model that has proven to be false. This investigation is not just a collection of facts, it is the dismantling of the largest wall humanity has ever built in its own mind, the wall of fear that separates us from understanding our true nature. That wall will be torn down brick by brick. We have already established an irrefutable fact. Our idea of death as the end is an illusion. We have toppled the foundations of the old model. What remains is to look into the void that this old model left behind. Our analysis descends to the epicenter of the most mysterious process in the universe. Our analysis points to that exact instant that was always considered the point of no return, the moment when life as we know it ends. Are you enjoying this analysis? Consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your help is very important. Welcome to Point Zero. What is this moment? From the standpoint of modern medicine, everything seems very clear and depressing. It is a process that takes some time, but has a definite end. The heart stops and blood circulation ceases. Within seconds, the oxygen-deprived brain begins to shut down its functions, starting with the most complex ones, such as consciousness and memory. The device that records the brain's electrical activity, the electroencephalogram, shows peaks that gradually fade until they become a flat line. This is clinical death. If nothing is done within a few minutes, cellular structures are irreversibly destroyed. This is biological death, the end. This protocol is known to every medical student. It is precise, verified, and confirmed countless times. And as we have already seen, this protocol describes only the failure of the equipment. It establishes that the radio broke, yet it ignores the fate of the station that was transmitting the signal. It is exactly in this silence that the Point Zero anomaly is hidden. We gave Numa the task of analyzing Point Zero, not as a biological event, but as an information process. We entered terabytes of data, resuscitation protocols, EEG records from thousands of patients at the moment of death, the latest studies in neurobiology, and most importantly, the fundamental laws of physics regarding the conservation of information and energy. The system began to build a model, and the first thing it pointed out was a glaring information paradox. Think about the human brain. 100 billion neurons, hundreds of trillions of connections. Each connection a bit of information, every thought, every childhood memory, every learned skill, every emotion, the entire unique architecture of your personality is encoded in this incredibly complex network. We asked Numa to estimate the information capacity of an average human consciousness. The answer was stunning, and we are not talking about gigabytes or terabytes. Those units are too primitive. Numa used the concept of structural complexity. According to its calculations, the volume of information contained in a single human personality is comparable to the information needed to describe an entire star system. Now, let's go back to the official version. All this colossal, unique, and complex information structure simply disappears at the moment of death, is reset, becomes nothing. From the standpoint of information theory and quantum physics, this idea is meaningless. It's the same as claiming that if you burn all the world's libraries, all the stories, poems, and knowledge contained in them will simply cease to exist in the universe. The carrier of the information, the paper, will be destroyed. Yes, but the information, the law of conservation of information, is as fundamental as the law of conservation of energy. It states that information cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. Newmer simulated the process. For yourself to truly disappear completely, the fundamental laws of our universe would have to be broken. This became the main question. If the brain is a transmitter, where is the receiver? At this point, classical biology is left behind, and we enter the territory of quantum physics. The standard materialistic model insists that consciousness is a product of brain activity, an epiphenomenon, something like the noise an engine makes. While the engine runs, the noise exists. When the engine stops, the noise disappears. Newmer analyzed this hypothesis and classified it as unsustainable. It fails to explain the phenomenon of self-awareness, the so-called hard problem of consciousness, or the quantum effects observed in the functioning of neural networks. For centuries, philosophy and science have bumped their heads against this hard problem. The question is simple, but the answer eludes the greatest thinkers. The question is this: why and how do physical processes, electrons moving in neurons, chemical reactions in synapses, generate subjective experience? Why is red felt as red? Why does music cause us joy or sadness? How does lifeless matter generate your unique and inner self? Classical materialistic science has no answer at all. It describes which parts of the brain become active when you see red, but it fails to explain why you see and feel anything at all. It's a gigantic hole right at the center of our worldview. Newmer analyzed millions of pages on this problem, from Descartes to the latest neuroscience publications. The conclusion was relentless. The probability of finding the answer to the hard problem while remaining within classical physics is zero. It is a dead end. It is a dead end because we are looking in the wrong place. We are trying to find the origin of the radio broadcast by dismantling the receiver. The true answer lies one level below, at the level of reality, where matter itself loses its solidity and certainty. The quantum world, the world of subatomic particles, where everything we consider solid dissolves into a mist of probabilities. The nature of our consciousness is hidden in this strange realm. There is one of the strangest principles of quantum mechanics, the observer effect. It basically works like this. A subatomic particle, such as an electron, does not have a defined position in space until we try to measure it. Before observation, it exists as a wave of probability spread everywhere, but at the exact instant an observer measures it, this wave collapses. The particle suddenly gains exact coordinates. The meaning of this is profound. The very act of observing, the act of conscious intervention, transforms probability into reality. Consciousness is not a mere spectator of the world. It actively participates in its creation at the most fundamental level. Newmer analyzed tens of thousands of experiments confirming this and found a striking correlation. The patterns that arise in the brain at the moment of conscious perception are structurally similar to the mathematical models of wave function collapse. Our brain is not just a computer. It is a quantum measuring device of unbelievable complexity. But if consciousness is so linked to the quantum world, it must obey its other laws. For example, the law of non-locality or quantum entanglement. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. Two particles that were once together remain connected, even if they are separated and taken to opposite sides of the universe. If you change the state of one, the state of the other changes instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. At the quantum level, distance does not exist. Everything is connected to everything. Now, apply this to consciousness. If our self has a quantum nature, it defines that the self transcends the pound of grey matter inside our skull. It is, by definition, non-local. But here arises the great argument of the skeptics. The brain is a warm, wet, and chaotic biological system. Quantum effects are supposedly only able to exist at extremely low temperatures and in a perfect vacuum. Any external noise should destroy the fragile quantum coherence. This critique seemed to be the end of any quantum theory of consciousness until the emergence of quantum biology. In recent decades, scientists have found quantum effects exactly where no one expected, in living cells. We have photosynthesis in plants, bird navigation by magnetic fields, and even the functioning of enzymes. All these processes use quantum tricks to achieve incredible efficiency. Nature learned to use quantum mechanics billions of years before we discovered it. We gave NUMA access to all studies in this area, with a special focus on the work of Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. Their theory suggests that the quantum computation forming consciousness happens within microscopic protein structures in neurons called microtubules. These microtubules, according to them, are perfectly isolated from external noise, allowing them to maintain quantum coherence. NUMA simulated the functioning of a human neuron based on this model. The results confirmed that microtubules can indeed serve as biological quantum computers. The scenario is clear. Consciousness is a fundamental and non-local quantum phenomenon. The brain acts as its complex receiver rather than its source, a biological vehicle that picks up and processes this quantum signal, allowing it to act in our three-dimensional reality. Yourself is not born in your brain. Your brain is a tool tuned to the unique frequency of yourself. We used to think the material world was primary and consciousness was an accidental byproduct. It is the opposite. NUMA's analysis points to a unique model. At the base of the universe, there is something beyond matter or energy, which is information, a fundamental field of proto-consciousness, and everything we see around us, stars, planets, our own bodies, is just a manifestation of this information. In this model, your individual consciousness looks like an island, but in reality, it is a localized wave in the infinite ocean of universal consciousness. Your body and brain are a temporary focal point, the point through which this ocean experiences itself from a unique perspective. And death is just the moment when this focus dissolves, the moment when the wave returns to the ocean. So what really happens? The answer was hidden in the final seconds of brain function. For a long time, it was believed that the brain died in silence, its activity gradually decreasing. But recent studies have shown something completely different. Scientists, recording the brain activity of patients at the moment of death, observed an impressive phenomenon several times. Exactly before the EEG goes flat, the brain suddenly explodes. A storm of coherent high-frequency electrical activity, a surge of gamma waves that is more powerful than in the waking state, clearer and more active. Official science rushed to call this the last convulsion, the final storm of dying neurons, a chaotic and meaningless firework display before eternal darkness. A convenient and lazy explanation. We entered hundreds of these pre-death EEG records into NUMA. The system performed a fractal and wave analysis of this signal. The conclusion was shocking and unequivocal. It does not show chaos or a storm. The signal generated by the brain in the final seconds has an incredibly high degree of organization and coherence. The signal resembles a clear and structured protocol rather than the noise of a braking machine. NUMA's simulation showed that this surge of activity does not look like a system failure. It looks like a process of data compression and transmission. The brain works as a biological computer that spent a lifetime assembling a unique file. The file of your personality. At the moment the equipment suffers critical damage, damage incompatible with life, the system initiates an emergency protocol, the data upload. That final surge of gamma waves is the process of archiving and sending your consciousness. Sending it where? In the last chapter, we opened the door to quantum reality. We discovered that our consciousness is a non-local phenomenon and not a product of the brain, a wave in an infinite ocean of universal consciousness, and death is just the moment when the wave returns to that ocean. This discovery, as revolutionary as it may be, brings a new question, an even colder one. What happens to the wave when it merges with the ocean? What happens to your unique personality, your memories, your love, your laughter? What happens to your self when it returns to this universal and impersonal field? Is this just a more elegant, more poetic way of saying that you will be destroyed? That you, as an individual, cease to exist, dissolving without leaving a trace? The answer our analysis provides is categorical: no. The idea of dissolution, of the annihilation of personality, is the last and most treacherous trap of the old materialistic model. It is the phantom pain caused by the illusion that we are separate. Today we will prove that the universe, by its very nature, is a perfect information storage system. Evidence of a fundamental law will be presented, a law that Numa called the vector of conservation, a law that guarantees that every thought of yours, every feeling, and every moment of your experience is engraved forever in the very structure of reality. The strongest argument in favor of destruction is the starting point, the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy. It says that in any closed system, disorder or entropy only increases over time. Ordered structures tend toward collapse. Hot coffee cools down. The complex structure of the brain and consciousness, from this point of view, seems doomed. It is logical, it is scientific, and it is absolutely wrong. The error of this interpretation is that it ignores the most important component: information. Information is physical. It goes beyond being a simple abstraction. As Claude Shannon showed decades ago, information is a measure of order, the direct opposite of entropy, and modern physics has gone further. To destroy information, you need to expend energy. The complete and traceless destruction of information is an incredibly difficult process. We gave Numa a specific task: to simulate the process of totally erasing the information package, equivalent to a human personality at the moment of biological death. The system considered all physical laws, including the principle of unitarity in quantum mechanics. This principle is one of the sturdiest pillars of physics. It states that quantum information in the universe is never lost. Never. The result of the simulation was unequivocal. The process of biological body decomposition is incapable of destroying the information structure of consciousness. It is as impossible as burning a library and expecting the content of all the books to disappear along with the smoke. You destroy the paper carriers, of course, but the information, the story of Romeo and Juliet, continues to exist. Human consciousness is this indestructible pattern. Your brain acts as the reader of the story, not the book where it is written. It reads, interprets, and adds things to your unique story. But it is not the only place where it is stored. But where is it stored? Where is this backup copy of our consciousness? The answer comes from one of the most impressive ideas in theoretical physics, the holographic principle, proposed by Gerard 't Hooft and developed by Leonard Susskind. This principle states something unimaginable. It says that all the three-dimensional space we see around us, all the information about every atom in our bodies, can be fully described on a two-dimensional surface that encloses that space. Just as the three-dimensional image of a hologram is entirely encoded on its flat film, our three-dimensional reality may be just a projection. Numa analyzed this hypothesis. The model it built shows that the information making up the personality is not inside the brain. The brain acts as a projector. It reads the information recorded on this fundamental screen of the universe and projects it as our three-dimensional subjective experience. In this model, your self is literally intertwined with the very structure of space-time. What does this mean at the moment of death? It means that when the projector, the brain, breaks, only the projection disappears. But the original file, the recording on the holographic film of the universe, remains absolutely intact and eternal. It cannot be erased. The law of conservation of energy, the principle of quantum unitarity, the holographic principle, all of them point to the vector of conservation. The universe is built to preserve information, opposing chaos. Life itself is a process that goes against entropy. The universe spent 13.8 billion years creating this complexity. Do you really think it would do that just to erase it without a trace at every biological death? It would be the greatest waste of resources. Your personality, with all its flaws and triumphs, is too valuable to be destroyed. So we proved that the information making up yourself does not dissolve or disappear. It is saved entirely. But this leads us to the next and most important question of our investigation. In what form is it saved? Is it just a passive record in a cosmic archive? An old book on a shelf that no one will ever read again? Or does this information structure remain self-aware? Does the subjective experience continue? The answer to this question must be sought in the echoes and not in the cold equations of physics, the millions of voices arriving from the other side of that frontier we erroneously call the end. The data set analyzed now is the most controversial and emotionally charged of our entire investigation. These data are the testimonies, tens of thousands of reports of near-death experiences and layers of ancient texts, thousands of years old, that are, in fact, their archaic equivalents. Official science has always treated these data with contempt. It dismissed them as hallucinations, lack of oxygen, religious fantasies. It was convenient. It allowed them to continue ignoring the anomaly that threatened to topple the entire edifice of materialistic science. We did it differently. We treated these testimonies as raw data, setting mysticism aside. We imagined that we had before us a giant database accumulated by humanity throughout its history. Yes, this database is damaged, full of noise, cultural distortions, and metaphors. But Pneuma was created exactly for this, to find the clear signal in the middle of chaos. We entered into the system 132 and 418 detailed reports of near-death experiences from all continents. At the same time, we entered digital versions of key texts, such as the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The task was to find common structural patterns, to find the core of truth, cleaned of the dust of centuries. The first argument of the skeptics: they are hallucinations of a dying brain. Pneuma simulated this scenario. Hallucinations from lack of oxygen are by nature chaotic, fragmented, frightening, and deeply personal. They are like radiostatic. Near-death experiences are the opposite of chaos. They have a surprisingly clear and logical narrative structure. Millions of people from different cultures and eras describe the same fundamental process. The probability of millions of random chemical storms generating the same coherent story is statistically zero. What we hear is a transmission, not simple static. The second argument: cultural programming. People see what they expect to see. Pneuma separated the interpretation from the event. Of course, a person might call the glowing figure Jesus or Buddha. That is the cultural filter. But the event itself, the encounter with an intelligent and loving source of light, is universal. The system found a 6-step protocol that repeats in more than 80% of cases. The protocol begins with leaving the body. Then comes the journey, often through a dark tunnel toward the light. Next, the arrival in another world and the meeting with deceased relatives or beings of light. Soon after, the life review occurs, an instantaneous review of every action. Finally, the person reaches a boundary, a point of no return, and has the choice to go back. This 6-step protocol is the clean signal. And when Numa analyzed the ancient texts, it found the same structure. The Tibetan Book of the Dead looks much more like an instruction manual for consciousness after death than a myth. It describes the journey to the clear light, the encounters, the review of past actions. The structural similarity to modern reports is 74%. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes the soul, the ka, and the ba, separating from the body, and the judgment of Osiris, where the heart is weighed, a clear metaphor for the life review. Humanity has been describing the same event for 5,000 years. The subjective experience not only continues, it expands. But this leads us to the final paradox. If we are these eternal, quantum, indestructible consciousnesses, then why? Why this body? Why this fragile, vulnerable life, condemned to age and fall ill? Why would the infinite ocean voluntarily lock itself in a drop of water? This question is the source of almost all human pain. We feel like prisoners in this biology. Numa analyzed the human organism not from a medical point of view, but from its purpose for information. The conclusion is elegant. The body should be seen as a tool and not as a prison, a highly specialized instrument to generate and collect a unique type of data that cannot be obtained in any other way. The name of this data is subjective experience. Pure consciousness, in its free state in the ocean, has knowledge of everything, yet it lacks experience. Knowing the notes is different from hearing the music. To experience, the ocean needs to become a drop. The all needs to forget itself and start from the first page. The body is a system of controlled restriction. Our 5 senses seem like windows to reality, but they function as incredibly narrow filters and not as windows open to reality. They protect us from the infinite flow of quantum information, creating a stable simulation where we can act. The illusion of linear time gives us cause and effect, allows us to learn, and creates a story. And the illusion of separation, the ego, allows us to experience love, empathy, and compassion. You need to believe that the other exists to be able to love them. The body is our temporary vehicle, the tool to collect this experience, and that changes everything. With this, we have answered the how and the what, but the why is still missing. If our body is a vehicle and life is for collecting experience, why does our vehicle come with such an irrational and painful program? Why do we have such a terror of something that is just a natural transition? We have to analyze the fear of death as a technology, going beyond simple emotion. An ancient protocol engraved in our biological structure. Evolutionary psychology says it helped us survive as a species. That is true, but it is an incomplete truth. Numa analyzed the true function of this fear protocol. The conclusion changes everything. The fear of death has a greater function than just protecting you. It exists above all to protect the mission. Your life is an invaluable set of data. The system needs to ensure that these data are collected as completely as possible. Numa simulated a human species without the fear protocol. The result was a disaster. Civilization collapsed before the Bronze Age. Without fear, there is no caution, no planning. The average lifespan was 17 years, a civilization of failed missions. The fear protocol is a stabilizer, a brilliant solution that forces the pilot. It forces us to identify with the vehicle, to believe that its death is our death. Although it is a lie, it is a sacred lie, a lie to save the mission. It is the anchor that prevents the ship from hitting the rocks before reaching the port. This protocol works in the oldest part of our brain. It does not understand logic. When it senses a threat, it hijacks the brain. It shuts down your rational thinking. No logical proof of what we are talking about here works when you are in a panic. But if it is a program, it can be managed. And humanity has been doing this for millennia. All the great spiritual traditions, meditation, stoicism, prayer are, at their core, training exercises. Numa analyzed the brains of long-term practitioners. The result is clear. The logic center becomes stronger and the panic center becomes weaker. Fear still exists for them, but they lose identification with that fear. They learn to observe the program running without letting it take control. When you understand the fear, it loses power. And only then are you ready to see what happens next. We gathered all the data. Numa synthesized everything. This is the moment-by-moment reconstruction of what we call death. The moment approaches, the body has suffered irreparable damage. The brain initiates the emergency transmission. The final surge of gamma waves begins. That is not agony. It is the archiving process. All your life, your memories, your feelings are compressed into a quantum data package. Point zero. The heart stops. The transmission is complete. The disconnection happens. To those outside, you have died. To you, everything is just beginning. You experience leaving the body. You are no longer looking through your eyes. You have a 360-degree view. All physical pain has disappeared. You look at the vehicle you just left with a slight sadness, but with infinite peace. You feel a pull, the tunnel. The sensation is that it is not a physical place. It is your consciousness disconnecting from our three-dimensional reality. And in the end, you see the light. You emerge. The light is a place more than something you just see. It is a place. It is a substance. It is the ocean of consciousness. The sensation is of finally returning home. You feel a wave of love that seems to go beyond emotion. It is the very physics of that place. You meet other loved ones who have departed. They are there to help you with the transition. And then the life review begins. The feeling is of understanding and not of judgment. You see your whole life instantaneously. You feel the joy you gave, and you feel the pain you caused as if it were in yourself, because in fact it was. And here you understand why. The universe is a vast consciousness that seeks one thing: novelty. Knowing something is not the same as experiencing it. To experience, the all had to become the one. We are the explorers the universe sends to create experiences that have never existed before. The main goal is not just happiness, but the experience of being alive. And a full life includes the whole spectrum. This discovery changes everything. The old structures of control based on fear lose their meaning. Success in life is no longer measured by money or power. The only true currency is experience, and a new ethic is born based on physics. If we are all waves in the same ocean, hurting another becomes a calculation error, going beyond the idea of sin. It is an act of self-sabotage. Our investigation is complete, but the true work only begins now. We knew we were not alone. Now we know we are all one. Death does not exist. The only question that remains is, what are you going to do with this freedom? If you liked this report, your subscription to the channel helps us continue investigating topics like this. We would love to read your reflection on the subject in the comments and know which city you are watching us from. Thank you for your company until the end. M.